Phil Theory. How Wonder Woman has doomed humanity. Alright? I'm not gonna lie. I don't know what he's talking about. Like always, like I'm always lost. I don't know where I'm at. But his theory does look interesting. And it has Wonder Woman in it. So you know it should be a good one. Because Wonder Woman movie was good, so it should be a good theory. In case I can't make any jokes, man. Yeah, let's just get into the video. Alright. 3, 2, 1, let's get it.
You know, sometimes it feels like as soon as I make a prediction theory, the studios re-edit the movies just to spite me. Like the time I called Rey a Palpatine and then episode 8 was like, no, she's not. She's a nobody. And then there are those other times I'm 100% absolutely sure that nobody in Hollywood's listening to me. And today is one of those days. But hey, that's just a theory. I'm jumping the gun. Here, let's talk about Wonder Woman.
Facts. Okay. It's nice.
Hello, Internet.
Is this a
Welcome to
new
Film Theory, the show that's now doing sequels to its own theories. Dedicated fans may remember back in 2017 when I ran a theory that Wonder Woman would never have made it from Themyscira to London in time for the end of World War I. The TLDR of that theory was basically that her boat was too slow and the available waterways to get her there weren't helping the situation. Link is in the upper right-hand corner of the screen in case you missed that plug. I personally liked that episode a whole heck of a lot. Anyway, at the time I thought Zack Snyder was to blame for the shoddy math, but I guess now it's time to apologize. I'm sorry, Zack. Don't get me wrong, it's not because the math makes any more sense now than it did back then. Still doesn't, just a huge turd sandwich of job on the math on that one. But the reason I'm apologizing is because Zack Snyder had nothing to do with the newest DC movie, Wonder Woman 1984, and wouldn't you know it, there's still another major math issue with the travel in this new film, which, gotta say, it's ironic, considering the whole theme of the movie is not cheating to get ahead, and, well, they cheated the math to, you know, get ahead.
You cheated, Diana. That is the only truth. And truth is all there is.
Now, because the movie's new and not everybody has access to HBO Max, I'm gonna try to minimize the spoilers. I'm not gonna talk about the end of the movie or any major twists, but here's your minor spoiler warning for the first third of the film. In a scene that's been featured in pretty much every trailer, Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor get into a fighter jet in DC and fly it non-stop to Cairo, Egypt. I'm here to tell you that in this movie full of massive plot holes, this is probably the biggest, Diana and Steve would have probably died in a fiery ball of death before ever finishing the trip.
The truth is what powers it, not me. The truth is bigger than all of us.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way, Diana, because your movie certainly disagrees. So let's set the scene here. Diana and her once dead but now brought back to life boyfriend Steve are hunting down an ancient artifact known as the Dreamstone, which has the ability to grant wishes, kind of, when it feels like it. But it takes something in return.
There's a chance of happening,
also when it feels good, like it. Admittedly, the mechanism of this thing is a bit inconsistent. Probably a theory for another day. Anyway, Diana starts hunting down the last person she knew to have possession of the Dreamstone, a failing oil baron named Maxwell Lord. Max is on a trip to Cairo, Egypt to secure huge oil reserves from one of the most oil-rich men in the world. Since Steve Trevor technically died back in 1918, he doesn't have himself a valid passport, so they can't just hop on a commercial flight. So how do you get to Egypt? You steal an airplane.
You cheated, Diana.
No, that's not cheating. That's just borrowing from an unconsenting party for an indeterminate amount of time. Now, this theory isn't about stupid plot holes, and it's important to remember that a character not thinking of something doesn't count as a plot hole. But before I move forward, I just gotta say it, they bring Steve back to life by having him be in another man's body. Like, he is one dude, and he says, hey, I'm Steve at a party, and Diana doesn't recognize him, but then a minute later, she starts seeing him as Steve, but to the rest of the world, he's still this other guy. It's creepy. It has disturbing implications about Steve and Diana's relationship all throughout the movie, but ignoring all of that, possessed dude probably had himself a valid passport. Just saying, you could have saved yourself some trouble just by checking. Anyway, they walk right into what we're told is the Smithsonian Archives and steal one of the fighter jets on exhibit, taking off for a romantic flight using the airstrip that is somehow right outside the building. All right, so the actual Smithsonian Archives are here, smack dab in the middle of downtown Washington, D.C. So the fact that there's an airstrip ready for takeoff on the grounds makes it seem unlikely that that's really where they are. In reality, I think they're instead at the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center just outside of Washington, which is a Smithsonian-affiliated museum with direct access to Dulles International Airport. It's a minor point, but I just wanted to call it out. So Steve, a former fighter pilot from the 1910s, is amazed that modern planes can fly so far.
It's like Steve Rogers.
So fast. You have a plane that can fly from here to Cairo in one shot.
And of course, there are plenty of planes that can make it that far. The distance from Dulles Airport to Cairo, Egypt is 5,822 miles, or 9,369 kilometers. And the longest regularly scheduled flight in the world is Singapore Silver Airlines' direct flight from Singapore to Newark, New Jersey at a length of 9,534 miles, or 15,343 kilometers. So no problem making this flight, right? Well, yes, but actually no. 5,822 miles may not be close to the longest flight on Earth, but it's still a very long flight, and most planes aren't made for anything nearly that long. And there's one key reason why. Fuel. It should surprise anyone to learn that airplanes use a lot of gas.
Of course.
Fuel is heavy, and the more fuel you have on board, the fewer passengers, cargo, and other things you can carry. This means that all planes are made with a trade-off between fuel and utility. Of course, fighter jets only have 1 or 2 passengers, and their cargo is mostly munitions, but fighter jets are also made to be highly maneuverable. The more fuel you have stored in your wings, the more you have to worry about your ability to make sharp maneuvers, and the more you have to deal with fuel distribution to keep your weight constantly balanced on a nice edge. This means that most fighter jets don't have themselves marathon ranges. So which fighter jet are we dealing with here? Well, the plane that the production team used for the exterior shots is a modified RAF Panavia Tornado. It's a British plane, but there's a major issue with that: the seating arrangement. You see, the Tornado seats pilots in tandem, one pilot forward and the second one behind, not the side-by-side seating arrangement that we see in the movie. Many fighter jets choose to do this because it's a more aerodynamic arrangement, requiring less frontal area. From a design standpoint, it's much easier to stretch the nose of the plane out a bit to add a second position rather than making the whole thing wider. Because of the manufacturing and aerodynamic issues, side-by-side seating in fighter jets is actually a fairly rare thing, with the F-111 being one of the few models that featured it. The Soviets were bigger fans of the side-by-side seating arrangement than most. For instance, their Su-24 would have had side-by-side seating that looks a lot more like the cockpit shots from Wonder Woman. In reality, the plane that we see in the movie just doesn't exist as a real aircraft, and would probably have had to have been decently bigger. But it turns out none of this really matters, because none of those planes are making it anywhere close to Cairo. Remember, the trip from Dallas to Cairo is 5,822 miles, 9,369 kilometers. So how do these titans of air superiority stack up? Terribly. Because fighter aircraft have different ranges depending on whether they're going into battle or cruising, there are usually 2 different ranges associated with each type of craft. The combat range, which is the range of the plane when it's loaded for combat, and the ferry range, which is the range of the aircraft when it's carrying its pilot and minimal equipment. It's pretty surprising to me that the Smithsonian would just keep a plane around with a full tank of gas just in case someone happened to steal it and tried to fly it to Egypt, but doesn't look like they're loaded with live ammo, so I'm going to be going with full gas or something just rubbish. Assuming the plane is the Panavia Tornado that we see in the exterior shots, the ferry range is 2,650 miles, 4,264 kilometers. It's not even half the distance it needs to make it to Cairo. The Su-24 does way worse, with a ferry range of 1,724 miles, 2,774 kilometers.
Don't worry, we can just swim the rest of the way. It's just like, what, 3,000 miles?
But that's only with external fuel tanks, which the plane has some of in the movie, but not all of them. And again, they're still 2,200 miles short. That means that not only will these planes not make it to Cairo, they're not even making it to Africa. Even if we wanted to rig things in their favor, Diana and Steve are doomed. The closest point in America to Africa actually isn't where you'd expect. It's not down in Florida where you might think, but way up on the Quoddy Head Peninsula of Maine. Maine is the closest state to Africa. Wrap your head around that one. Anyway, this point in Maine is 3,154 miles away from Africa.
They could make
it. Best case scenarios range, the F-111 with maximum extra fuel tanks. They're not even gonna come close to making landfall. Diana and Steve are doomed to drop into the ocean, invisible, never to be found again. Remember, the reported max ranges of these planes are optimized maximums, assuming standard temperature and pressure, as well as well-trained pilots. And you see, that's your second problem. Steve is not a well-trained pilot. Sure, he was probably one of the best pilots of World War I, but in 1984, aviation has made some major advances.
It's been like at least 100,
really
110
inspiring
years.
Some confidence in your abilities there, bud. In World War I, pilots were given about 50 hours of training and had an average life expectancy of 69 flight hours after that. That means that Steve Trevor probably had around 100 to 120 hours of flight experience at most, and had only ever flown in non-pressurized, propeller-driven aircraft. The fact that Steve could figure out a modern jet enough to get it off the ground is a miracle, but making the plane fly optimally is a whole other issue. Steve is not making for a great pilot here, and we know that because the first thing he does is fly through fireworks. Fireworks tend to explode between 50 and 300 feet, meaning that at most, Steve Trevor is flying at 290 feet. That is an extremely low altitude to fly, and aside from being incredibly dangerous, dangerous, it's also just not efficient. Airplanes aren't climbing
Diana's
to a
calm,
cruising
she just jump out of
altitude
that
of
bitch.
30,000
But
feet
you,
to beat
you're
the
a human.
traffic. It's actually more efficient for a plane to fly at higher altitudes. It's because the air gets thinner as you get higher, which actually grants two benefits to the plane. First, and probably the one
Less
you've
air.
already guessed, there's less air resistance
Exactly.
in front of the plane, meaning that it
Less
can push
energy.
forward with
More
less
faster.
effort. The second benefit comes from the way air and fuel combine to create combustion. In an engine, fuel is always flowing into chambers, being compressed by pistons and exploding. The size of that explosion depends highly on how much air is also in the chamber when the explosion happens. At higher altitudes where the air is thinner, you actually need a higher volume of that thinner air to create the optimal explosion to drive the engine. Airplanes have the ability to change the mixture of air and fuel at will to create optimized engine output. The higher you go, the leaner you can make your mixture, which can save up to 25% on total gas usage during the flight. Steve Trevor should have some basic knowledge of this concept, but would probably have a hard time adjusting to the aircraft he's in. Steve was used to planes that could only get up to 11 or 12,000 feet before they stopped working, so he'd probably consider that high altitude travel. Above 12,500 feet today, the FAA requires pilots to have oxygen on board. So even if a plane in World War I could have made it above that altitude, the pilots would be passing out in their open depressurized cockpits. This is going to be far below the optimal altitude for any modern jet. Even the highest altitude aircraft of World War I, German bombers, reached at absolute most 24,000 feet. Better, but still far below optimal cruising altitudes for long distance travel. All of this is to say that Steve and Diana don't have a chance of making it, but you know what? Forget all of this. Throw away the flight ranges, the plane types, Steve's lack of flying experience. None of it matters. Even
Doesn't matter in the real world.
A plane that could go the distance and a pilot with experience to get them there, there's one thing they can't avoid: getting shot out of the air.
Fight. Your gift. I'll never understand it.
That's not the only thing you don't understand, Diana. You don't understand how radar works. You see, stealing a plane, kind of a big deal. So when Steve and Diana hit the runway with the purloined plane, alarms start going off. The control tower is notified that, hey, some unidentified aircraft is on the runway and about to take off. Don't worry, Steve's an ace pilot that's gonna outrun them.
The way I fly, they will never find us.
Oh, wait, it's the 80s now, and there's been a new innovation in the world of flight tracking called radar.
Facts.
Radar. I can explain now with LCS anywhere, even in the dark.
To escape detection at the last minute, Diana uses her incredibly ill-defined power set to, you know, turn the jet invisible. It's a fun nod to the old Wonder Woman comics and TV show where the invisible jet was just a quirky thing. And sure, you could use a magical cloaking ability to hand wave away the authorities tracking you down and shooting your plane out of the sky. It's all magic. Why should radar work on a magical plane? Well, that excuse would have worked, except they made one key mistake. They flew through fireworks. See, the movie shows us the invisible plane as it flies through fireworks and clouds, carving its shape through the air, which means that the plane still has a physical presence despite being no longer visible. And that's a problem if you're looking to avoid radar. You see, the word radar stands for radio detection and ranging, and it is designed to be used specifically for things when they are hard to see. The really simple explanation is that radar sends out radio waves,
like, this movie
which
just
then bounce
it's
off of
shambles.
the physical object and go back to the receiver, telling that receiver that, hey, there's an object there. We've covered all this before in a past Sonic the Hedgehog movie.
Get the missile
theory.
and blast that
the
bitch.
basics of radar. And that alone would show that an object able to push clouds and fireworks out of the way would bounce back those radio waves. But we can take it one step further, because when it comes to control towers following an airplane's movement, there is an added wrinkle. Once your plane takes off, your pilot activates a transponder device inside the aircraft. The transponder detects incoming radar signals and broadcasts an encoded radio signal back with flight number, altitude, airspeed, destination, information like that. A blip representing the airplane now appears on the controller's radar screen. And yes, military planes do have these types of transponders. I double-checked. So regardless of whether Steve flipped the switch on or not, the fact that the control tower saw the plane on its radar means that it was on and wouldn't just go away because the plane is no longer visible. Sure, Diana might know more about 80s culture than Steve, but she certainly doesn't seem to know any more about 80s scientific advancements. Any way you slice this one, that rogue aircraft is going to be shot down out of the sky long before it gets anywhere close to Africa.
Diana
For the
jump out, so it's fine.
second time in as many movies, Wonder Woman has failed us because of a basic transportation-related miscalculation. In the last movie, Wonder Woman would have just been too late to save the day, but this time, her and her boyfriend's lack of knowledge about modern jet fighters would result in both of them plummeting into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The theme of the movie was to not cheat to get ahead, but you know, maybe the theme should have been do your research before you try and cheat. And for DC or any of the writers of these movies, please, if anyone is over there listening, please think about this next time. So far, my 2 Wonder Woman theories have all been about transportation science,
next one
boats
be
and
for
planes.
cars,
I'd love
bikes,
to do a theory about
rockets.
the lore next time. Or maybe how this universe ties into the 1970s Wonder Woman series. The last thing I want to do is ruin the next movie by, I don't know, pointing out that Wonder Woman's rocket will never make it to orbit. But hey,
facts.
That's just a theory.
Oh my God, a film theory.
And you should consider subscribing to see when Wonder Woman 3 does come out, because it was...
Guys, okay, as you can see, Wonder Woman and maths just don't get along, alright? You know, it doesn't even make... And this wasn't even maths, this is just not basic knowledge. Knowledge that someone like Wonder Woman, who's lived on the earth for like, what, 100 years? That was not 100 years, I just realized. It's from 1910 to 19... So 70 years. What... Man's... What's up with this freaking like invisible jet thing? Is that I thought the invisible jet was just invisible from the beginning. Is this like a new? I don't know. But I guess Wonder Woman just can't do maths. Neither can the directors. But if you guys enjoyed the video, I mean, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and maybe in the next video of Film Theory, it won't be a Wonder Woman maths one. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.